Hi, fiancés, and welcome back to the HelloPrenup podcast. My guest today is Jessica Bishop. She is the founder of Budget Savvy Bride. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
You're so welcome. We're so excited to talk to you today. So tell us all about the Budget Savvy Bride. What is it?
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is. And I've been saying it all morning because I'm like, I know this is going to happen to me.
Yeah, I do it too. Yes. So the Budget Savvy Bride is a really amazing and robust online wedding planning resources for couples who are looking for ways to plan a meaningful wedding, a beautiful wedding, but also do it on a budget that they can actually afford. And so we, over the last almost 14 years this May, have been sharing all sorts of incredible resources, from interviews with real couples who got married who share their budget breakdowns. We have DIY projects. We have free printables that you could download. And we also have a great section of wedding deals that you can browse to save money on the different things you need for your wedding. So yeah, it's an amazing resource. And we're so happy to be, a place where couples can turn to get advice, inspiration, and ideas for their big day.
It is definitely a big day. And of course, everybody is so excited about it. But yes, so much money and so much time and planning goes into it. So how did you start this?
So I actually started the budgetsavvybride.com as almost like a personal journal, to be honest. It was very much a blog back in the day. I was, pretty freshly out of college, and I was planning a wedding, and my fiance and I at the time, we're both working very entry-level jobs. Of course, in 2008, 2009, that's like when the recession hit, right? And so along the course of our engagement, we both ended up getting laid off from our jobs. We're like, how are we going to still have this wedding? We had to come up with all of these ideas to cut costs and, make things work for what we were able to spend. And so by the time, the wedding day came, I think just so many other couples were kind of in similar positions. And there was not a ton of resources out at that time, especially online for couples who were planning weddings at all, but especially on a smaller budget. And so it grew really organically from there and ended up becoming a full-time business. So here I am for almost 14 years later. And it's been really cool to see the growth.
Congratulations. I think it's really cool when somebody just says, I can't get what I need, so I'm just going to create what I need. I'm actually just going to start helping people in the process.
It was a happy accident. And then I realized how many people were in that similar position. And so we really, I pivoted and made it more of a universal resource and just wanted to share the information and make it available for couples to benefit from.
So what are one of the things, the most common things that people are looking to save costs on? Or another way to phrase the question is, why are weddings so expensive? And why do we need to hunt for all these resources to make it so cost effective?
Oh gosh. Yeah. So, it is a question that I think every couple comes to when they start planning and really looking into the cost of everything. They're like, why is this all so expensive? But the reality is, in a lot of cases, you're putting on a professionally executed event. And a lot of times that involves hiring professionals to perform services for you, to buy products from. And there are hard costs involved in that in some cases. And in others, there's, time and effort and energy on behalf of those professionals and vendors. And so, it is expensive in a lot of cases to have a professionally executed event. But I think there are so many ways in every different category of a wedding that you can find ways to cut back. And that's something that we do at Budget Savvy Bride, is share those resources, share those alternatives that are maybe a little outside of the box from what is considered more traditional, but it allows you to have a similar impact or effect at a more affordable price.
So what are some of the things that people can do to immediately start meeting the demands of their budget?
Oh gosh. Well, the first thing I always recommend is really sitting down with your partner and figuring out what exactly it is that you're able to spend, and also what you're willing to spend. Because honestly, just because you have a certain chunk in your savings doesn't mean you should blow it all on this one day, essentially, right? You probably have, other financial goals that you're working towards together, whether it's buying a house or starting a family or going on an epic honeymoon or maybe starting a business together. I think it's really important to kind of put your wedding and that celebration in the in the proper context of like your greater life goals and plans. It's an important day. It's a very special day. Obviously, I love weddings. I'm still working in the industry all this time later, but I think it's easy to get caught up in it, right? And so getting really clear together on like what you're able and willing to spend on it. And then of course, looping in the families as well who are going to be contributing and figuring out exactly what that amount is that you're willing to spend before you go out and start booking things or even interviewing vendors, honestly. So
it sounds like it's a lot of details. It's about being thorough, but then also being disciplined, like actually setting a budget and sticking to it. How has it changed throughout the 14 years that you've been doing this?
Well, I would say the biggest thing that has changed is the abundance of options that are available now compared to maybe like 10, 15 years ago. With the advent of, the internet and e-commerce and drop shipping and, direct to consumer brands, there's so many new, and not even new now, but over this period of time, companies have come out who are able to offer products for a better price point. It used to be you could only, shop for bridesmaids dresses at your local bridal salon. They were insanely expensive, like $300. You're forcing your friends to all get these matching clone dresses, and they're insanely expensive. And then there's always alterations on top of it. And now there's like amazing brands that are e-commerce, direct to consumer. You can order them online for like $100. In some cases less. Some of them even will allow you to get custom measurements. So you don't have to worry about the alterations. Like there's so many options now that it's a blessing and a curse, I think, because it can cause a little bit of overwhelm, I think, especially for, the bride who's the one making a lot of the, aesthetic decisions and all of that stuff.
For sure. And in terms of the bridesmaids context, it's pretty amazing that there are so many resources, to your point, because I think it's hard when there is a bride that's very particular and she does want you to have that particular dress from, let's say that is over $100 and you're not going to wear it again. What's a good way to approach that bride and just say, hey, I found a different resource. I found another dress. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone's relationships with their friends are different, but hopefully if you come from like a really honest and like authentic place and say, like, I love the look you're going for. If you find something that's really comparable in style and, aesthetics, but at a more affordable price point, I'm sure the other bridesmaids are going to have your back too. So like, why not?
Right. Totally agree. And then what about for grooms? Do you find that mostly it's women that are running this budget and trying to stick to the planning? Or do you find that a lot of grooms are heavy-handed involved in the planning process as well?
I mean, I wouldn't say they're heavy-handedly involved, but I think when it comes to the budget, like they absolutely should be, obviously, because it's a joint decision, it's a joint financial decision. And that's one of the things about wedding planning is that it's a really great opportunity for a couple to come together, whether it's, a mixed gender couple or a same-sex couple, coming together and having conversations about what are our values and our goals and our priorities as far as this wedding is concerned. And what are we willing to compromise on and what are we not? I think, it just provides so much opportunity to have these conversations that are such good practice for like married life, right?
Totally. So what advice would you give somebody that's having a hard time discussing a budget with their partner and actually coming to a place of agreement?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I am not a professional financial advisor. Disclaimer. But I think it's so important to really have these open and honest conversations because as we know, you guys are the experts in prenups. Money can be a really big issue and a point of contention in a marriage. And so if you can't talk about your wedding budget and come to compromises on those things, like you might have some trouble down the road too. So it's important to get those things out in the open and learn how to deal with the uncomfortableness of it, honestly.
Totally. And I love where your head's at. It's like, start the conversation and the communication skills now, because it's only going to help you as you go. And we add people to the mix. We're having kids, we're buying houses, we're sharing assets and all the property, et cetera, et cetera. So I love where your head's at with that. Okay, so it sounds like there's a ton of resources that people can do. What other things? So I heard bridesmaids dresses. We can get creative now and actually get alterations. Before we need alterations, we could save money. What other things are people able to tap into now that maybe they weren't able to tap into 14 years ago?
Yeah. So for the brides in particular, there's so many more direct to consumer bridal lines available. But another great thing about the internet is the increase in the number of like resale opportunities that there are. And so I've seen so many brides use sites like Still White or like preownedweddingdresses.com. There's a few different ones out there. Nearly Newlywed is another, where you can shop pre-owned wedding dresses from brides. I mean, you're only wearing it once, right? Like, and then you put it in the closet and it lives there forever. Not only can you resell your wedding dress after the big day to recoup some of your money, but you could also purchase a pre-owned wedding dress and save like 50% on the cost of a designer gown. Like, why not?
Totally. Absolutely. And do you find that a lot of women are actually doing that? Or do you think there's still a lot of bustle around it has to be new and we have to do the thing and go to the store and say, I do? What do you think?
I mean, I'm one for bucking tradition, to be honest. Yeah. So I think as, you know, we see these like younger generations come up, like we're seeing a lot more of people willing to go their own way and do things on their own terms. And so if they're able to get the look for less, you know, or the thing that they want at a deal, especially, you know, with the advent of like apps like Poshmark and Mercari, they're used to this buying and selling the real, you know,
right.
Getting those designer items for less. I think it's becoming a lot more common. And I know at the Budget Savvy Bride, we've published tons of different weddings where brides used, you know, a pre-owned wedding dress for their wedding. And we're thrilled to save the money and be able to allocate it towards, you know, an area of the wedding day that maybe has a greater impact on the experience for their guests and not just about like what they're wearing. So
totally.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most expensive item that people are spending their money on for this big day?
Well, I think reception costs obviously are a huge chunk of what it takes to throw like a wedding celebration. So food and beverage, alcohol markup is insane.
Yeah.
So one thing that I always recommend is if you can find, you know, a non-traditional wedding venue that allows you to bring in your own alcohol, you have more more control over the cost per bottle. You can choose, you know, a higher end wine if you'd like, or you can go with something cheap, like, you know, $3 Chuck from Trader Joe's if you want.
No shade.
So yeah, I mean, I did it, you know, back in the day. And I actually we created like custom wine labels that we put on the bottle. So nobody knew that it was cheap wine.
Brilliant.
Savvy tip.
Love it.
But yeah, so I think, you know, feeding and watering your guests is always something that costs a lot for sure.
And that's actually leads me to another point. What do you think some of the biggest mistakes people are the biggest mistakes that people run into on their wedding? Like maybe you should spend a little bit more to avoid such a, you know, terrible experience for yourself or your guests or whomever.
Yeah. Well, obviously a lot of our readers at Budget Savvy Bride are looking for ways to cut costs and save money. And one thing I always, you know, recommend across the board is even if you're doing a lot of the stuff yourself, to always have a coordinator, pay someone to be there and oversee the events on the day of. You don't want to be like stressing out and running here, there, setting up decor and centerpieces yourself. I think it's totally worth it to outsource that so you can really be present with your, you know, loved ones and really truly enjoy your day.
I think that's really, really smart. My brain didn't even go there, but you're right. It's about being able to enjoy the experience for yourself and not just putting on this show for everyone else. But that you can look back and go, yes, I actually remember everything. And I did have time to eat and I did have time to dance and enjoy it. Yeah. Is there anything that, you think people regret spending their money on, or they always overspend and you find most of the time people are unhappy with that decision?
You know, the thing that I've heard a lot is flowers because they are so expensive.
Yes.
You know, and over the last couple of years with the pandemic and everything, there's been all sorts of issues with supply chain and availability and things not showing up or coming, you know, in less than ideal shape, like maybe a little wilted or things like that. Even outside of pandemic times, you know, you might order bulk flowers online and think you're going to arrange them and they just they aren't as fresh or as vibrant as you would like. And so another interesting resource that's come out like in the last, 5 or so years is silk wedding flowers that you can rent. So there's a really great company called Something Borrowed Blooms, where you can rent prearranged bouquets, centerpieces, everything that like matches all together, and they ship them to you. You use them, you put them back in the box, and you ship them back. It's like a no-brainer. It costs like a fraction of the cost of working with fresh flowers. And I just think it's genius,
It's super genius. And I think that it sounds like it's a lot lower maintenance. Like you really don't have to worry about them like delivering it the day of. Perhaps they can deliver it the night before. And so you don't have the flower guy, running in 5 minutes before the aisle or whatever. It sounds like all around, it's just a better process. This is so interesting. So where do you see the wedding industry going in 10 years? What are some of the trends that people are running into now? And where do you think they're going?
Oh, it's such an interesting question. I'm not a fortune teller, so
I wish you were.
It's hard to know. If I could have predicted this pandemic, I might have made a few different choices. But something that I'm seeing currently, I think, is as a result of the last 2 years and the situations we've all been in, is really coming back to kind of the drawing board and thinking about what actually matters to us about this wedding. And I think in light of so many restrictions in so many places and the big events having to get canceled or scaled back or postponed, it really kind of makes you stop and think like, who actually needs to be present at this wedding? Who would I not walk down the aisle if they couldn't be present? And really thinking about who are the crucial people who you're like, I would not get married if that person couldn't be in attendance. And doing something more scaled and intimate, scaled back and intimate, sorry. I think it's put so much into perspective for people that it's really causing them to think about what's excess and what's essential, I guess.
It's super helpful. You're right. When my husband and I got married, we got married at the courthouse. Talk about a budget. And my dress came off Amazon. I was also 3 months pregnant, which, that leads to a lot of conclusions. But to your point, I look back at that day and I go, the only thing that mattered was that he was present and my mom is a witness, but everything else was really magical. And it was kind of nice just having me and him in that moment and not having to worry so much about the hustle and the bustle. And did the flowers arrive? And, is Auntie Lou having a good time? I just worry about, this is a commitment between two people. And so everything else truly is extra. What's some of the best marriage advice that you've ever received in terms of planning your wedding and keeping it intimate and memorable?
Yeah, I think, and to be transparent, I'm actually divorced. But I think looking back, the best marriage advice that I've heard, or maybe that I would even give at this point, is to really have those hard conversations early. And I know you think you've had them all, but maybe you haven't. And getting really clear on what the purpose of the wedding is in the context of your life, and focusing on the true meaning behind it and celebrating that love and that relationship with the people who matter the most.
Yeah. I think that's,
yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that, no.
I could go into a whole other rant about how social media has played such a big role, I think, in wedding expectations and this whole idea of keeping up with the Joneses. And nowadays you're not even just comparing yourself and your situation to the friends in your close circle whose weddings you're actually attending, but you're also seeing these celebrity weddings and really wealthy, influencer weddings and things like that. And you're thinking, oh, I need my wedding to be that amazing or that beautiful or that extravagant. And it can really be hard to not lose sight of what actually is important and what matters,
Totally. And to not feel bad about it. I think there's a lot of people that go, oh, I have a budget. It's such a damper. It's such a, oh, shoot, I wish I had this unlimited amount of money so I could have this beautiful day. But to your point, if it really is about you and your partner making a commitment to each other and starting your relationship off on the right foot, everything really is extra. So in the context of going through, you've been engaged, you've planned a wedding, you've been married, and now you're divorced. Looking back, now you have this whole new, fresh, outlook at how it all went and all the details. Is there anything that you wish you would have done prior to getting married that you didn't, but in hindsight would have been a little bit more helpful?
That's interesting. I mean, I think we did, like the standard, like premarital thing with like our church. But even that, I think, was not as thorough or like diving deep as it could have. I think these days, a lot of people are a lot more open about going to therapy or seeking counseling. And especially if you might have a little bit of trouble and feel uncomfortable, bringing up certain topics with your partner, having a neutral third party can be really, really beneficial. And I don't think there's shame in seeking counseling at any point in your relationship. And I think a lot of times, I'm not like, I have to keep giving a disclaimer, right? Like I'm not a professional therapist, but I think a lot of times couples wait until it's like too far gone to even try. And so, I mean, that's something that I would say. And, if there's anything you feel like nervous about talking about, sometimes that can be really helpful in getting those things out.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice. One of the things that we always talk about at HelloPrenup, obviously, is you're writing your life story together. So make sure you're on the same page. And truly,
I love that.
It's very unique, obviously, in the terms of prenups, right? It's like, okay, we're literally putting it all on a page, maybe 100, but we're getting it down. But to your point, it's like we got to flex those muscles early and often, and really keep it, fresh between the two partners of, where are we going, where are we headed, and how do we want to see this go? So in terms of prenups, do you have any experience with prenups or any sort of additional resources that are available in the Budget Savvy Bride?
To be honest, no, I don't have experience myself. I did not have one. Before I got married, I was definitely, if anything, I could say, I was definitely of the mind that like my marriage was going to be forever. Like the D word was off limits. Like I never thought I would be in this position, at this point, but, all that to say, like, you never know what could happen. And from my understanding, with my experience and from my personal experience, and then also seeing other friends go through divorces over the last, 5-10 years, I think it's so important if you can outline that stuff in advance, because the law is very state by state from what I understand. And you just never know if you don't set those things in place. The state government could be deciding on that division for you. And that to me feels really risky in retrospect. But yeah, it's so interesting. Until we connected with y'all at HelloPrenup, like we didn't have a whole lot of resources on there. So we were so glad to learn about, the services that y'all offer. And the fact that it's so affordable compared to meeting with attorneys, I think is amazing, because again, like, you think it's going to be so expensive, but if there are alternatives where you can do that thing and save money, I mean, that's something that we're all big fans of at Budget Savvy Bride. So
yes, well, clear. Yeah, we're in the same space, because we have realized it doesn't need to cost an arm and a leg, and you don't need to have to hand over your firstborn child to get a prenup, and it doesn't have to be so awkward and uncomfortable. It's interesting that you mentioned something that we hear about all the time, which is, well, I'm getting married, I'm never going to get divorced, or I'm never going to have to run into this issue because otherwise I wouldn't be getting married. And so, hindsight's always 2020 and all the things, but we're trying to help people at this point with the divorce rate still increasing. And I think millennials in particular are jumping on and saying, hey, I have more assets now than, my parents did when they were my age. Maybe I've started a business, or, I actually have bank accounts that maybe my parents didn't have, any sort of property prior to getting into marriage. And so we realized, there really is a place for people to budget and get the sort of protection that they care about prior to entering marriage, instead of dealing with all of these things while you're married and then potentially running into the D word and getting a divorce. So with that, is there any sort of advice that you would have gave yourself, 15 years ago when you're planning this wedding and getting engaged, and thinking where you are now? Any advice you would have gave your younger self about this?
Oh, so much. How much time do you have? I mean, I definitely think that I got caught up in a lot of the details and focusing so much on, what was happening with the wedding day. Although, I can't lie. Like I thought I was making the right decision. I was, very headstrong about it. I think my parents might have thought I was a bit too young. I was 25 when I got married, but looking back now, I actually turned 38 this month. I do feel like I was too young, but that's just me. In hindsight, I look back and I'm like, I didn't really know who I was yet. I didn't know who I was going to be or what I was going to care about. But at the same time, my entire career has come about as a result of getting married. And so at the end of the day, like it's one of those things where I feel, everything happens for a reason. I don't necessarily have any regrets. But yeah, it's interesting the perspective that like some hindsight can bring for sure. So
totally. Do you think you'll ever get married again?
That's a good question.
To be continued.
TBD.
That's good. I'm excited for you either way. And so if anybody is excited to start budgeting, I say that because I don't like dealing with money. I don't like counting dollars and cents. It stresses me out. So for anybody that is excited and they want to jump in, where can they find you? Where can they find the Budget Savvy Bride and actually start building a budget that they're proud and excited about?
Yeah. So our website is thebudgetsavvybride.com, where you can find all sorts of resources. The site is limitless in the amount of content that we have on there from the last 14 years. But we have free printables, we have deals that you can browse to save money on everything from your suits to your dress to your flowers to HelloPrenup services. So come on and check out our wedding deals, as we call them. And then I wrote a book that's a very popular wedding planning book on Amazon. It's called The Budget Savvy Wedding Planner and Organizer. And it actually has a really great section. Like the first chapter is all about setting your vision and kind of putting it in the context of like, what you're looking at doing down the line, to keep you really focused on spending what you can afford and what you're willing to spend. And so that's really helpful. And then of course, we also have our podcast, The Bouquet Toss, which is where we chat about traditions and trends and help couples decide what to keep and what to toss from their wedding day plans.
That is such a good name. I'm freaking out about the name. Wow. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jessica. I really enjoyed our conversation. And to anybody, you heard it first, go check out thebudgetsavvybride.com, pick up all your resources and plan that wedding that you are proud of. Thank you so much for your time, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, listeners, we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.